The pup's snarl snapped the breakfast tray from my hands. Porcelain shattered across the nursery floor, cream splashing the legs of my plain brown skirt. Every maid near the doorway gasped and stumbled back so fast their slippers scraped the stone. The little beast stood between the overturned chair and the fire, black fur bristling, silver eyes bright with warning. He was not large yet, still young enough to be called a pup, but there was nothing soft about him. Everyone in the palace feared him because he belonged to the Alpha King. Everyone feared him more because he bit. "Don't touch him," one of the older maids whispered sharply from behind me, clutching her apron. "If he tears your throat, His Majesty will blame us all." Us. Not him. Never him. I stayed where I was, my pulse jumping hard enough to hurt. The pup's ears flattened. His lip curled again, but beneath the sound, beneath the raw threat of it, I caught something else. His front paw never settled fully on the floor. He kept shifting his weight, fast and restless, as if standing still cost him. The other girls did not see that. They only saw teeth. "Move away, Omega," another maid hissed. She did not use my name. In this palace, Elara was too much kindness to spend on a servant born at the bottom of the order. Let the guard handle it. A guard waited outside the nursery door, broad-shouldered and armored, but even he had not stepped inside. He held a catching pole in both hands like a man preparing for a wolf twice this size. The sight made the pup's growl drop lower. If the guard came in, the animal would lunge. If the animal lunged, the guard would strike. And if the king's wild pup bled because I had done nothing, no one would care that I had only been carrying breakfast. The child in the corner did care. I heard the small hitch of breath before I saw him. Curled beneath the window seat, half hidden by the long curtain, the young prince held his knees against his chest. His little face had gone pale, but his eyes were fixed on the pup, not with fear, but with the fragile terror of someone watching the only thing he loves being cornered. That changed the room. The prince was not crying for help. He was waiting for someone else to be brave first. I bent slowly and set the silver tray aside. "No pull," I said, before the guard could take another step. The room went still. The guard frowned. "Girl, that is not your order to give." "No," I said, my voice shaking once before it steadied. "But if you go at him like a hunter, he'll answer like prey that learned to bite." One maid laughed under her breath, cruel and quick. "Listen to her. A kitchen Omega thinks she understands a royal wolf. Maybe I should have backed away then. Maybe a clever girl would have. But cleverness had never saved me from being despised, and the prince was still in the corner, silent as a shadow. So I did the one thing no one in that room expected. I lowered myself to the floor. Gasps broke around me. The guard cursed softly. I ignored them all and sat on the cold stone, not too close, my hands open in my lap, so the pup could see I carried nothing. He stared at me, chest fluttering with short, angry breaths. Up close, I could see a dark stain caught in the fur near his paw. Blood. Not much, but enough. "There you are," I murmured, though I did not move toward him. I kept my voice low, almost secret, the way my mother once spoke to frightened livestock before winter storms. "You're not wicked. You're hurt." The snarl wavered. Behind me, someone whispered, "She's mad." Maybe I was. It took a little madness to stay gentle in a place that rewarded fear. The prince shifted under the curtain. "Ash," he said in a tiny voice, naming the pup at last. "Don't." Ash's ears twitched. Silence moved first. It slipped through the nursery in a thin, impossible thread, quieter than the fire, quieter than the servants holding their breath at the door. The black pup's growl did not vanish all at once. It thinned, broke, returned in smaller bursts, each one less certain than the last. Ash stood stiff beneath the prince's bed curtain, hackles raised like knives, golden eyes fixed on the one person in the room who had not flinched away. The Omega did not reach for him. That was what changed everything. Every maid in the royal wing had tried hands first, snatching, luring, cornering, commanding. Fear always rushed ahead of them, and the pup met it with teeth. But now there was only a low human voice and a song too soft to be called singing, more breath than melody, a half-remembered lullaby worn smooth by grief. The prince stared at her as if he had forgotten to blink. Ash's ears tipped forward. One step, small enough to miss if anyone had exhaled too hard. Then another. Claws clicked against the stone. The room tightened around the sound. A silver tray trembled in a maid's hands. At the threshold, The captain of the guard shifted his grip on his spear, ready to lunge if the beast sprang. It did not. The pup stopped beside the Omega's chair, ribs fluttering with each breath. Up close, his wildness looked different. Less like rage, more like strain. Foam clung at the edge of his mouth, not fresh, but dried from earlier. A tremor ran beneath his dark coat. Not aggression. Pain. The prince made a wounded sound. He only gets worse at night. No one answered him. No one, perhaps, had listened before. The Omega lifted her gaze, not to the guards, but to the boy hidden behind silk. How long? He swallowed. Since the hunt road. 3 weeks, maybe more. 3 weeks. Long enough for panic to become routine. Long enough for the palace to call the creature savage and stop asking why. Ash lowered his head by an inch. Then, with the caution of something that had learned mercy was often a trick, he pressed the side of his muzzle against her knee. The room gasped. A maid dropped the tray. Metal rang across the floor. The captain cursed and stepped forward, but the prince shouted first. Don't touch him. The force in that child's voice stopped grown men in place. Ash jerked at the noise, a growl rising again, but the Omega was already moving. Not to restrain him, not to protect herself. Her hand hovered where he could see it. Waited. Let him choose. That choice took only a second, and still it seemed to shake the room harder than any attack could have. The pup leaned into her palm. Warm fur. A hidden shiver. Beneath the thick ruff at his neck, her fingers found the source of it all. A lump of torn flesh, matted and swollen, tucked under the collar line where no frightened servant had dared look closely. The skin there burned. Infection. Deep enough to poison the blood. Deep enough to drive any creature half mad. A trap wound, she realized. Something jagged. Something that had broken off inside. He's hurt, she said. The captain gave a hard laugh. We know that. Stand away. No, the word came from the bed. The little prince pushed the curtain aside at last. Barefoot, pale, trying to be brave. Not her. Him. He's hurt. The correction landed like a slap. For one brief moment, the room belonged neither to rank nor fear, but to truth plainly spoken by a child. The Omega kept her hand steady on Ash's neck. If you force him now, he'll bite. If you leave the wound, he'll get worse. Her eyes lifted to the prince. Has any healer touched him? The boy's silence answered before his mouth did. They said he was too dangerous, he whispered. Of course they had. Easier to condemn a creature than fail one. Ash suddenly sagged against her leg. Not asleep. Not safe. Simply exhausted from carrying pain too long. The latch fell into place with a hard iron click, and the sound turned the air colder than the winter glass. I stood just inside the king's private study with Ash's blood still drying in a thin rust-colored line across my cuff. The room smelled of cedar smoke, old paper, and something sharper beneath it. Wolf, grief, authority. Heavy curtains shut out the afternoon. A blackwood desk stood between the windows like a barricade, though the man beside it needed no barrier at all. King Rowan had not raised his voice when he ordered the others out. That had been worse. Men who ruled by shouting could be predicted. Men who spoke softly and were obeyed at once were dangerous in ways a servant learned to fear early. Look at me, he said. I did. Up close, the stories about him felt badly told. They never mentioned the exhaustion carved into the corners of his mouth, or the way loss could make even a king look like a man who had forgotten what rest was. His shoulders were broad enough to fill the room, but there was strain in the stillness he held, as if any movement might break into violence. A silver ring marked with the royal crest flashed at his hand when he set it on the desk. My son says Ash let you touch him, he said. My guards say they found you kneeling beside a beast that has bitten 3 handlers and sent 1 healer to the infirmary. His gaze dropped to my stained sleeve, then rose again. I prefer truth to miracles. So tell me what you are. Not who. What. The word should have stung less than it did. I folded my hands to keep them from trembling. A maid, your majesty. His expression did not change. A maid does not quiet a royal pup with a song no one in this palace has heard. It was not the song. No, it was the pain. That reached him. Barely. A tightening near his eyes. A silence stretched between us, taut as wire. You expect me to believe every physician in my court missed what you saw in minutes? He asked. I expect nothing, I said. But no animal fights that hard without reason. Animal. The correction was quiet. but it landed like a blade. Ash is not an animal. I lowered my head. No, sire. The fire cracked in the hearth. Outside the door, I could feel the court waiting like wolves beyond brush, listening for the cry that meant blood had been drawn. I knew what they wanted from this room. A confession. A punishment. A simple explanation that would keep their world orderly. King Rowan moved around the desk slowly, studying me as if I were the threat and not the man every corridor been around. You are an Omega from the lower household, he said. Transferred 3 months ago from the West Wing laundries. No family name in the record. No recommendation from a noble house. No reason to be near my son. His eyes sharpened. Yet today you did what none of my people could. Why? Because the prince looked lonely enough to break. Because the pup was suffering. Because no one else had knelt down. I swallowed all 3 answers. Because he needed help. His jaw flexed. That is not enough. It was enough for me. For the first time, something like anger flared cleanly across his face. Not the cold kind courtiers wore, but the kind born from fear that had lived too long without relief. Do you think kindness makes you innocent? He asked. Do you think I have not seen ambition dressed as gentleness before? So that was it. Not only suspicion. Memory. I lifted my chin before caution could stop me. Do you think cruelty would have made me more believable? The room went still. The answer might have cost me my place, my wages, perhaps far more than that. I felt at the moment it left my mouth. My pulse hammered behind my ribs. But I did not take it back. Morning bells drifted through the east corridor in a silver chain of sound, soft enough to make the palace seem harmless for a breath. By then I already knew better. The king's study had gone so quiet after my answer that I could hear the fire settling in the grate. Rowan did not raise his voice. Somehow that made him more dangerous. For a long moment, he only looked at me. Not as a man looked at a servant, but as if he were trying to decide whether I was a knife hidden in linen or the first honest thing to cross his threshold in years. Then a knock came at the door, quick, uncertain, followed by the scrape of someone forgetting fear in a hurry. My king, said the guard outside, breathless. The prince refuses his morning meal again. He is asking for. The pause gave it away before the words did. He is asking for the singer. Heat rushed into my face. I had no title by which such a request should reach a king. Yet the room changed at once. Suspicion did not leave Rowan's features, but something older cut through it. Worry. Immediate, unwelcome, unmistakable. His jaw tightened. Bring her. I almost laughed at the absurdity of being brought when I was already standing before him. But the guard opened the door, saw me there, and looked so startled that even Rowan's mouth nearly hardened into something like disbelief. The prince means you, Rowan said. That should not have mattered as much as it did. He dismissed the guard with one glance, then turned back to me. This does not clear you. I know. No one enters my son's rooms without my leave. I swallowed. Then give it. A dangerous answer. Another one. Yet he gave a single curt nod. The nursery was warmer than the rest of the palace, heavy with banked fire and milk gone cool in untouched cups. The prince sat by the window in his nightshirt, though the day had fully broken, his small fingers curled around the wooden wolf I had seen abandoned on the rug 2 nights before. Ash paced below him, restless, tail low, ears flicking toward every sound except the trays set before them. Neither looked at the food. Both looked at the door when I entered. Something inside the room changed so fast, it was almost visible. The prince straightened. Ash stopped pacing. A thin sound left him. Not a growl this time, not quite a whine, but the raw, relieved note of a creature who had waited too long and been afraid of being wrong. The child slid from the chair before any maid could stop him. You came. Not my king. Not my lady. Just that. I came, I said. His small hand caught 2 of my fingers, solemn as a vow. Ash pressed against my skirt, so hard I nearly lost balance. Behind me, one of the older maids drew in a sharp breath through her teeth. The prince led me to the rug as if I had always belonged there. Ash circled once and collapsed against my knees, the heavy warmth of him seeping through wool and skin alike. Only then did I understand what the servants had meant when they whispered that he was wild. They had mistaken terror for temper, pain for savagery, loneliness for threat. I began to hum before thinking. Nothing grand. Just an old harvest tune my mother once used when storms made the shutters shake. The prince leaned into my side within moments. Ash laid his head across my feet, and for the first time since I had entered the royal wing, both of them ate. Not much. A bite of bread from the boy, water from the pup. But every eye in the room saw it happen. By noon, the whisper had spread farther than smoke. In the laundry hall, voices lowered when I passed. In the scullery, they rose on purpose. She thinks a few songs make her special. Watch how quickly men confuse usefulness with invitation. The prince asks for her now. And the beast. By afternoon, the palace had found a new way to look at me. Not with gratitude. Not even with the sharp amusement I had grown used to in the servants' halls. This was different. This was watchfulness, thin and cold, like a knife edge catching light. Men-at-arms at the royal wing doors glanced down at the tray in my hands, then at my face, as if bread and broth might turn to treason if I carried them far enough. I would have preferred mockery. The nursery was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. The prince sat by the window with a carved wolf in his lap, his small shoulders tucked inward, his eyes on the rain gathering in pale lines across the glass. Ash lay beneath the table where the shadows were thickest. His body was still. His breathing was not. It came fast and shallow, a tremor through his ribs. "My prince," I said softly. He looked up at once. He did not sleep. I set the tray down. Did he snap at anyone? A tiny shake of the head. That worried me more. Usually Ash met the world with teeth first. Rage had become his language. But now his ears were pinned flat, not in warning. Lower, tighter, the way cloth twists when someone wrings it too hard. I crouched slowly, keeping my palms open. Ash. No growl. No lunge. Just a flicker of one amber eye in the dark. The prince slid from his chair before I could stop him. He cried, he whispered. In his sleep. I turned to look at him. Cried. Like he was looking for someone. His little fingers tightened around the wooden wolf until his knuckles paled. Like when I wake up and forget my mother is still gone. Something inside me went still. I had heard the queen was dead. In the palace, grief was spoken of in polished phrases, wrapped in custom until it barely resembled pain. No one had ever said it plainly in front of the child. No one, perhaps, except the child himself. I moved closer to Ash inch by inch. A healer's work had been tried on him already. Salves, restraints, sedatives, commands. I had seen the marks. A shaved patch near the shoulder where poultices had been packed on and changed. Faint bruising beneath the fur along the flank where strong hands had pinned him down. Everyone had treated the biting. No one had asked what the biting was for. When I reached under the table, he did not strike. My fingers found fur first, then heat, then the violent thud of his heart. Too fast, too wild. But beneath that panic, another thing lingered. Not sickness, not fever. The scent hit me a moment later. It clung deep under the soap and herbs rubbed into him by palace staff. Smoke, iron, male wolves, then emptiness where something else should have been. Pack, not the broad public scent of a court full of werewolves and soldiers and polished stone. Not rank, not power, not dominance. Closer than that. The scent a pup sleeps inside before he knows words. The scent that tells a young body it belongs somewhere and is safe enough to rest. Ash did not have it. He smelled scrubbed raw. My breath caught. I looked down at the prince. Who bathes him? The boy blinked. No one now. He fights. Before, he hesitated. Children always knew which truths adults wished buried. Mistress Vera sent kennel men. I knew the name. The king's household steward. Precise. Immaculate. Famous for order. Servants feared disappointing her more than they feared hunger. Did she say why? The prince lowered his voice as if the walls themselves might report him. She said he was making the royal room smell like mutt and mud. She said if he was to stay near me, he had to be cleaned properly. His face crumpled around the last words. After that, he got worse. A pulse of anger went through me so hard I had to sit back on my heels. Not madness, then. Not simple violence. The prince's last words stayed under my skin like a splinter all through the walk back to the nursery wing. Clean properly. After that, he got worse. I had spent enough years among kitchens and servant halls to know what that usually meant. Not a bath. Not care. A punishment dressed in perfume. The corridor outside the royal children's rooms lay strangely still when I returned. No maids rushing linen carts. No nurse humming to herself. Even the guard at the turn in the hall kept his eyes fixed ahead too carefully, as if he had been told not to see me. I should have trusted the silence less. The nursery door stood half open. A sharp, panicked sound ripped through the room before I reached it fully. Not a bark, Not quite a cry, but something raw enough to make my whole body move before thought could catch it. I ran inside. Ash was convulsing on the carpet beside the prince's little chair. His small body arched hard, claws gouging the woven rug, foam bright at the edge of his mouth. The water bowl had overturned. A silver dish lay near the hearth with scraps of minced rabbit still clinging to the rim. No, I dropped to my knees so fast they struck wood. No, no, no. Ash, look at me. The prince was backed into the corner by his bed, white-faced and shaking. I didn't give it, he whispered. I swear I didn't. Marta brought it. She said you sent it. Cold swept through me, so suddenly it felt clean. I caught Ash before he slammed his skull against the floor again and wrapped him in the blanket from the foot of the bed, pinning him gently enough not to hurt him, tightly enough to keep him from breaking himself apart. His heartbeat battered against my wrists. The scent coming off him was wrong. Metal, bile, and beneath it something bitter and sweet at once. Not fever. Not rage. Poison. Send for the royal physician, I said. The prince did not move. He was staring at the dish. So was I. Footsteps thundered behind me. Too many. Too fast. By the time I looked up, 3 guards had filled the doorway, and behind them came Lady Marta in a dove-gray gown, one gloved hand pressed to her chest, as if she had climbed a mountain instead of crossed a corridor. There, she said, breathing hard. I told you. I barely heard her. Ash had started shaking again. I slid one hand under his jaw to keep him from choking and reached for the dish with the other. A guard kicked it away before my fingers touched it. She was found alone with him, Marta said. And the child says the food came from her. The prince made a small, broken sound. That's not what I... Hush, Marta snapped, sharper than I had ever heard her speak to him. Everything inside me went still. This food was tampered with, I said. Smell it. No one moved. Smell it. I said again louder. One of the older guards hesitated, then bent just enough to catch the scent. His face changed. Not guilt. Recognition. Marta saw it too, and her voice sharpened with fear. She has had days alone with the animal. Plenty of time to learn what would sicken it without killing it. That is what women like her do when they want to seem necessary. Women like her. There was at last. Not concern. Not discipline. Removal. The prince found his courage before any grown man in the room found his honor. She didn't do it, he said, louder this time. Ash only sleeps when she sings. Marta rounded on him. Your Highness, you are upset. I'm not wrong. Neither of us heard Rowan approach. We felt him. The room changed first, the air pulling tight, every scent flattening under the force of his presence. Then he was in the doorway, broad shoulders filling the frame, his gaze taking in the blanket in my arms, the dish by the hearth, the guards, the prince's face. Ash, he said once. Silence broke around that one word. Ash lifted his head from the crook of my arm at once, not with the blind, snapping panic I had seen in him before, but with a sharp, listening stillness. The low warning sound in his chest stopped. Even Prince Lucian went quiet. Across the room, Marta dropped into a curtsy so fast her skirts whispered against the floor. The guards followed a breath later. I did not move. The king's gaze came to me last, and that was somehow worse than if he had begun there. It passed over the blanket in my arms, the cooling broth by the hearth, the overturned stool near the wall, then settled on my face with a force that made my spine lock. There was no shouting in him. No confusion. Only a terrible, deliberate attention. Come here, he said. Not to me. To the child. Lucian held his ground for half a heartbeat. Chin tipped up in the stubborn little angle I was beginning to understand. Then he crossed the room and stopped at his father's side. Rowan rested one hand on the boy's shoulder without looking away from Ash. Tell me, he said. Lucian's fingers tightened in the king's sleeve. They were going to drag her out. Ash was frightened. He bites when they frighten him. She kept him calm. Marta found her voice first. Your Majesty, the servant overstepped. She has been taking liberties for days. We cannot know what influence she means to gain through the prince or the animal. Animal. Ash's ears flattened. A tremor ran through him under the blanket. Before I could stop myself, I said, he is not an animal to them. Every eye in the room snapped to me. Even the guards looked startled that I had spoken. Rowan's expression did not change, but something sharpened in it. To them, the smart thing would have been silence. I had run out of smart things an hour ago. To the pack, I said. To the palace. To whoever decided his pain was easier to call savagery than suffering. Marta made a sound of outrage. One guard muttered under his breath. Lucian looked at me as if I had struck a match in a dark chapel. The king stepped inside and shut the door behind him with his own hand. That frightened me more than his entrance had. No witness. No easy appeal. No hallway years. What do you know? He asked. The question was for me, but I heard another one beneath it. How much has been hidden from me? How much have I failed to see? I swallowed. Not enough. Only this. He worsens when strangers crowd him. He sleeps when I sing. He guards the prince, not from hunger, but from fear. And someone cleaned blood from his coat without cleaning what caused it. The room went still enough for me to hear the fire settle in the hearth. Rowan turned his head, just slightly, toward the guards. Leave us. Marta stared. Your Majesty. Now. No one argued twice. Within seconds the room emptied until only 5 of us remained. The king, the prince, Ash, Marta, and me. Then Rowan did something no one in the palace would have believed if I told it badly. He crossed the room, lowered himself to one knee before the blanket, and held out his hand. Ash did not lunge. He sniffed once, then pressed his nose to Rowan's palm and made a broken sound that did not belong to a beast at all. It belonged to grief. I saw it hit the king like a blade. His hand slid to the thick fur at Ash's neck. Gently, carefully, beneath the ruff, hidden where no careless servant would notice. His fingers found something and went still. A collar. Not iron. Leather. And cut nearly through. Rowan looked up very slowly. Who removed this? Marta's face drained white. I never saw. Do not lie to me. The words were quiet. That made them lethal. Gasps moved through the nursery like wind through dry leaves. No one spoke after the king's question. Marta stood with both hands clasped so tightly at her apron that her knuckles had gone white, and the 2 guards near the hearth looked as if they wished the floor would open beneath them. In my arms, Ash stayed pressed against me, heavy and warm, but no longer thrashing. His ear twitched once under my chin. He was listening. King Rowan did not raise his voice again. He did not need to. The quiet around him had turned sharp enough to cut. Answer me, he said. Marta swallowed. I found him tangled this morning, Your Majesty. The strap was already damaged. I thought. You thought nothing. His gaze dropped to the leather in his hand. Nearly severed. Not worn through. Cut. Who had access to him? At that, Prince Lucian shifted by the hearth. The movement was small, but in a room held that tightly, it rang louder than a shout. I looked up before I could stop myself. He was watching Ash with his jaw locked, his face composed in that brittle way men use when they are certain no one will challenge them. Then horns sounded from the lower court. 3 long notes. Every person in the room flinched except the king. One of the guards went pale. The council summons, sire. They are assembled already. Of course they were. News moved in palaces faster than fire in old straw, and fear moved faster still. By now the noble houses would have heard enough to build a feast out of it. The king's beast had turned violent, servants had been injured, the collar hidden, the prince involved. They would not call it concern. They would call it duty while sharpening knives beneath the table. Rowan's eyes stayed on Lucian for 1 beat too long. Then he looked at me. Bring him, he said. For half a breath I did not understand. The prince did. You cannot mean to take that creature before the court. I mean to take my son, Rowan said. The words struck the room flat. My son. Not hound. Not beast. Not even ward. Something old and raw moved through Ash at the sound of the king's voice. He lifted his head, amber eyes fixed on Rowan, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw confusion give way to something far more dangerous. Hope. It frightened me more than his teeth ever had. The great hall at night never looked built by human hands. Torches climbed the stone columns in wavering bands of gold. Moonlight spilled through the high windows and laid silver over the black marble floor. Nobles in velvet and fur lined both sides of the ceremonial aisle, bright as painted saints and twice as merciful. Their scents tangled into one choking cloud. Perfume, wine, fear, calculation. At the far end, beneath the carved wolves of the royal crest, the court waited. So did the challengers. I had seen them only from a distance before. Lords with old claims and colder eyes. Men who smiled at the king with their mouths and measured weakness with every breath. Tonight they did not bother smiling. Whispers broke around us as we entered. That is the Maid. The Omega? They brought it here? Ash felt the noise before I could soothe him. His body tightened across my arms. A shiver ran through him, then another. When Rowan stepped onto the first black stone of the ceremonial floor, the hall bells rang once overhead, signaling the formal opening of grievance. Everything in Ash came apart. He tore out of my hold so fast the blanket ripped from my hands. Gasps burst from the nobles as he landed hard on the polished floor, claws scraping for purchase. The sound that left him was not a growl. It was a broken, rising cry that seemed to claw at the ceiling itself. He spun toward the packed rows of strangers, hackles lifted, chest heaving, teeth bared in blind panic. Several people stumbled back at once. For one terrible second, no one moved. Ash stood in the center of the court with his small body bowed like a drawn blade, for standing up along his spine, that raw sound still breaking out of him in jagged pieces. He was not attacking. He was drowning in fear, and every person in that room was letting him. Then the king moved. He did not bark another order. He did not reach for force. He stepped down from the dais, slowly enough that even I could feel the choice in it, and set his crown on the arm of his throne as if power, for this moment, would only get in the way. "Make space," he said. The command was quiet, but the court opened at once. I was already on my knees, my hands empty and visible, my own heart striking so hard it hurt. Ash's eyes flashed from face to face, wild, unseeing in the crush of silk and gold and judgment. I knew if anyone lunged for him now, he would break completely. So I did the only thing that had ever reached him before the fear did. I sang. My voice came out thin at first, shaken by the weight of the room, but it steadied on the second note. The old nursery melody was small enough to belong to no rank at all. Just breath. Just rhythm. Just a promise carried in sound that no hands were coming to hurt him. Ash's ears twitched. The king stopped 3 paces from him and lowered himself to one knee. The whole court seemed to stop breathing. No one had ever seen their alpha kneel for anyone. "Ash," he said, and there was no king in his voice then. Only a father. "Look at me." The pup's frantic panting hitched. His claws still scraped against the polished floor, but less wildly now. I kept singing, soft and even, and the king did something that shattered the last of the fear in me. He held out his hand, palm up, and waited. No demand. No force. No claim. A choice. Ash turned toward the sound of my voice first. Then toward the king. His body trembled so hard I could see it in his shoulders. One step. Then another. He let out one last broken whine and pressed himself between us, shoving his head under my hand while leaning his side against the king's chest. A sound moved through the court, but this time it was not fear. It was understanding. The king closed his hand gently over the back of Ash's neck. He was never wild, he said without looking up. He was in pain. He was being harmed in my own house, and mercy saw it before power did. No one dared answer. Marta was dragged forward first, white-faced and shaking. The guard captain followed, then 2 servants from the kitchens, then the physician who had signed away Ash's suffering as temper and bloodline. Under the king's gaze, lies fell apart faster than courage. Drug broth, rough handling, a silver clasp hidden beneath the nursery cushions to keep the pup agitated and dangerous in front of witnesses. Enough cruelty, done in small careful cuts, to turn a frightened child into a spectacle. Not one of them looked at me. They looked at the floor, at the throne, at the ruin of what they had tried to build. The king rose with Ash still pressed to his side. "Remove them from royal service," he said. "Every title, every post, every protection. Let the record show exactly why." Justice, when it finally came, did not roar. It landed. Then his gaze found me. In front of the full court, he crossed the last distance and offered me his hand. I stared at it like I had forgotten what kindness looked like when it was meant to stay. "You sat beside him when everyone else stepped back," he said. "Will you stand beside us now?" My throat tightened so fast I could hardly breathe. Around us, nobles who had once looked through me were waiting for my answer.